dissolving like snow. That's not something I see prophesied in the scriptures. I'm not sure what's going to be left if that happens. And given that as one of the meek, I'm hoping to inherit the earth, inheriting the melted snowdrops, not got quite the same appeal to me. But then I don't really fancy spending eternity wearing a nylon Nike playing a guitar either. So who knows what the future holds for us all. It's a pleasure to speak to you this week. We're basically going to look at some things in Luke 9 and Luke 10 over these 3 evenings. Luke 9 starts with the 12 being sent out, and Luke 10 starts with the 72 being sent out. So it's an interesting set of things for us to look at as we think about being sent out into campuses around the country at the start of the new academic year. So tonight we'll think about some things from the start of Luke 9, tomorrow from the end of Luke 9, and on Thursday from the start of Luke 10. Okay? So if you make a note of that, if the person next to you falls asleep and wakes up and discovers it's Thursday, you can fill them in on what's happened between 9 and 9. So if you'd like to turn to Luke 9. Luke 9, reading from verse 1. When Jesus had called the 12 together, he gave them power and authority to drive out all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. He told them, take nothing for the journey, no staff, no bag, no bread, no money, no extra shirt. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that town. If people do not welcome you, leave their town and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. So they set out and went from village to village, proclaiming the good news and healing people everywhere. Now Herod the Tetrarch heard about all that was going on, and he was perplexed, because some were saying that John had been raised from the dead, others that Elijah had appeared, and still others that one of the prophets of long ago had come back to life. But Herod said, I beheaded John. How then is this I hear such things about? And he tried to see him. So we have the 12 being sent out and commissioned in God's power. And the basic task they are given is to proclaim the kingdom of God, to spread the good news of this new thing that God is doing at this time. And they're given some instructions which are to do with dependency on God, that they're not to take what they need or what they think they might need as extra things with them. I don't know what you're like packing. I have 2 extremes. I have a taking far too many things and bringing them back because I take things in case it snows or there's a volcanic eruption or my bed collapses or I need to make coffee and tea at the same time with mugs for different people who like China mugs or whatever it happens to be. Or I go to the other extreme and I don't take enough stuff with me. I once went to a weekend when I was a student without a sleeping bag because I had no space in my tiny bag that I'd chosen to take to fit a sleeping bag in, because back when I was a student, sleeping bags were the size of this room and they didn't really do anything very small. So I had to scavenge for something to sleep in the church hall, and all I could find were some tea towels. Now, if you've ever done this, it is not particularly pleasant sleeping under 9 tea towels. They move around when you move around, and church halls in Scotland aren't that warm at the best of times, so it wasn't my favourite time. But what Jesus is saying to the disciples isn't rely on your personal stupidity or your personal preference, it's rely on me. So don't take extra stuff with you. Don't take a staff or a bag or bread or money, because when you get there you're going to receive hospitality from people. And if people welcome you, you're to stay there and enjoy that hospitality, and if they tell you to shove off, then shove off. You know, don't waste your time with them. Just shake your dust off their clothes so that publicly you're saying, we're shoving off, just like you told us to. Bear that in mind sometime in the future when you think, I wish we'd asked these boys to stay a bit longer. But for the meantime, only 12 of us, plenty of villages, see you later. So news of what's going on gets to King Herod. And he wants to understand what's happening. Word on the street is there's somebody doing amazing things in the villages. What is going on? And what he hears back is that some are saying John the Baptist has been raised back to life, some are saying that Elijah has come again, and some are saying it's one of the prophets. Now, of those, Elijah is the most plausible explanation. Why?
He's not dead.
Because Elijah didn't die. One of the few people in the Old Testament who didn't die. The other being? Enoch. Okay, so who knows what Enoch and Elijah have been doing in the time since then, but it's not inconceivable that Elijah could have come back to life again. Herod knows the idea of it being John is a little bit surreal, because he cut John's head off. And there's not been any reports of being like that character in Harry Potter. He's got his headless neck or something. It's a bit kind of unhinged and can take it off. It's interesting that the word gets back based on what the disciples have been doing. That the disciples have actually enhanced this image and reputation of Jesus. It's the disciples' activity that has brought this question into the public domain. So Herod really doesn't know what's going on, and he decides to try and see Jesus for himself. So if you scroll down past the feeding of the 5,000, once when Jesus was praying in private, this is in verse 28, and his disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say I am?" Now they're quite tuned in to what's going on, because they know what the crowds say. Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life. "What about you?" he said. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "God's Messiah, God's chosen one." So we have a situation where people are looking at the same thing. They're looking at Jesus and what he's doing, and they're drawing different conclusions about his identity. They're not quite sure what's going on. How do you decide what is true? We live in a world where people say and think all kinds of things. I saw the movie The Big Short the other day, which is about the global financial crisis, where everybody in the world of banking thought they knew what was going on. They thought that the subprime second-hand mortgage market was secure, and certainly the bonds that were rated AA or AAA, there was no way they could fail or go down, because people would pay their mortgages they always had. And it was complete carnage at the end when it fell apart. One or two people saw it coming, and one or two of them made quite a lot of money betting against what everybody thought the market would do. Although some of them weren't that happy, because although they made some money, they'd seen the impact it had on people's lives being devastating. How do you decide what to believe? Hope. Can you bring my visual aid, please? Hope has been struggling not to consume the aforementioned visual aid. This item was for a while the most desirable thing in New Zealand. People were desperate to get some. There was queues. Yeah. Lewis Road Creamery chocolate milk. This is the most fantastic product that has ever been made in New Zealand. It will totally change your life. My girlfriend and I queued for 6 hours, but we only got 1 bottle and there was no way I was sharing it with her. Welcome to New Zealand and the end of a beautiful relationship. That's what passes for romance in the southern part of the country, isn't it?
Once I just arrived down there.
Yeah. So, who decided that this was the best product that you couldn't get? Probably to do with the fact you couldn't get it, suddenly became so desirable. Get it quite easily now, given the fact that they've upped production to about 30 times what it was originally. Who's tried this? Who thought it was the most fantastic product ever made in the history of New Zealand? Now, it tastes quite like chocolate milk, actually. It's not as exciting as you might imagine. Hope, since you managed to not drink this, you may have it. Maybe you can bring a nice boy to share it with.
Jesus.
Sharing with Jesus, that's awesome. Does that mean you're pouring it out on the ground, or throwing it in the air? On our campuses, people believe all kinds of different things about Jesus and the Bible. If you asked people, some would say Jesus didn't exist. Some would say, well, he did exist, but he's not really relevant today. Some would say that he rose from the dead. Some would say that no way did he rise from the dead. No one rises from the dead. Some people probably wouldn't have heard of Jesus at all, might not even have an opinion. And one of the reasons that we are using Luke's Gospel this year is that we want people to be able to investigate Jesus for themselves. That desire that Herod had to see for himself, we actually want people to be committed to that investigation that will lead them to discover firsthand the truth for themselves. Because faced with all these different opinions, they can't all be right. So if you look at Luke chapter 1, in terms of the introduction that Luke makes in introducing his account in the first 4 verses, he says, "Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught." So Luke is writing in an environment where there are a lot of different accounts of the life of Jesus, and they all claim to be traceable back to the eyewitnesses, because if you want to have a credible account, you want to be able to say it goes back to so-and-so. So, there is if you've read the Da Vinci Code, there's a Gospel of Thomas, there's a Gospel of Peter, there's other Gospels that claim apostolic origin. And what Luke is saying is, I have checked it out carefully. I've investigated everything. I've gone back to the eyewitness accounts, and I have produced an orderly account so that you might know the truth. You might know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. Just because you've been taught something doesn't mean it is right or true. Who grew up in a Christian home? Okay? No point in believing something just because your parents tell you. Okay? By the time you get to about the age of 15, you suss out that your parents' views on a lot of stuff is actually quite bogus. Quite concerning as a parent. Children kind of go from adoring everything you think is marvellous to, then you think stupid. And there's not much in between. Just believing what somebody tells you or teaches you isn't very clever, but just disbelieving because you're taught it doesn't make much sense either. It's important to try and find out for yourself what is true. I would say all my kids at the moment are in that sort of phase in different ways of working out for themselves what is true and what they're going to build their lives on. Anybody who grew up in a Christian home had doubts about the Christian faith. Oh, look at the hand of other people. Oh, don't you ask me to do that alone. Yep. Mike, there's a first hand that went up. It's quite interesting. How do you decide what to believe? You didn't grow up in a Christian home. Okay? You had to make an investigation. You had to decide if you were going to believe Jesus and start following Jesus. How did you decide that when perhaps your friends weren't interested or your family wasn't supportive of that? I think broadly speaking there's three reasons, or three good reasons that you believe something. First of all, you have reason. We have been given minds to think about things. So there are things that we can reason through, that we can think about creation. Is it reasonable that this is an accident, or is it more reasonable that there is some design? Is it reasonable that there is something different about humans, or is it more reasonable that humans are just advanced animals? Is it reasonable that there is some spirituality within us that causes us to search, or is it more reasonable that we just have evolutionary impulses that lead us in particular directions? When we think about the resurrection, is it reasonable that the Roman guards fell asleep and the disciples stole the body and the Roman guards at fear of death were derelict in their duty? Or is it more reasonable that the biblical accounts are true in terms of the resurrection of Jesus? Is it reasonable that the disciples invented a lie that most of them went on to die for? Or is it more reasonable that they thought they were speaking about things that they had actually seen with their own eyes? Lots of people invent stuff and die for it, but very few people die for things that they themselves have invented. None of these things, we can go on and on thinking about things. None of those things are necessarily conclusive, but as you reason things through and think things through, what does it make most sense to believe? You know, when you came in tonight and sat down, you basically believed that the chair you sat on would support your weight. You had confidence in it because you've looked at chairs like that before and they look okay. Somebody might have sawed through the legs as a bit of a practical joke and you could have fallen down, but they hadn't, and you've been good. You didn't need to worry about it. The second thing is authority. What speaks with authority on the thing that you are asked to believe? So you may have people who have authority, or you may have texts that have authority. And what do you make of those? So if you were to ask me, do you believe in Australia? I would say yes. Because reasoning it out, there's a lot of stuff you have to explain. The kangaroos, the wallabies, Skippy, neighbours, Jeff Robson, boomerangs, duck bills. platypus. I mean, that just sounds like a joke, really. I mean, somebody took a mole and stuck a beak on it and we're in business, but can't really say it's a native animal in Australia. If I look at the atlas, page 96 has got Australia on it. I can look at page 94 and find New Zealand. I can see how I get from Wellington to Waikanae on that page. It's not impossible that the person who wrote the last page about Australia was having a colossal laugh. But I've got no reason, based on what I've seen in the atlas, to doubt its authority in terms of speaking about Australia. I don't believe in Santa Claus. So, he used to bring me presents. But then it turned out it was my parents and they'd been lying. I'm sorry if this has come as a major disappointment. Reasoning it out, I couldn't quite understand why my parents, who said they loved me, gave me rubbishy little presents, and this fictional stranger in a red velvet suit brought me big presents. I couldn't understand how he got into the house. I couldn't understand if he drank the amount of whiskey we left out in all the houses he went to, how he wasn't completely inebriated by the time he was at the end of our street, never mind round the rest of the world. Authority-wise, where do I read about Santa Claus? Children's books mostly. Children's books have got some things in them that I believe in, other things that I'm not so sure about. There might be a giant peach, I haven't discovered it yet. So there's reason, authority, and there's experience. You know, what have I actually experienced for myself? So I've been to Australia. I've met Australians. I've watched the Australian cricket team lose. By the narrowest of margins. Now, I could be hallucinating. I'm open to the possibility that Australia does not exist. That it's a bigger conspiracy than the Apollo 11 moon landings. That for generations, the myth of the Australian subcontinent has been perpetrated as a giant hoax on humanity. If you know anything about epistemology, you have to be open to that possibility. But I have to say it's unlikely. So I basically live my life on the basis that Australia is there. That Robson and Reid are who they say they are. Mark Santridge, I've always been more concerned about, but it's possible that he too is from Australia. You never know. Santa Claus, I don't leave out whiskey for Santa and milk and carrots for the reindeer anymore. Now it could be that Santa's discovered I was always a bad boy and I was just kind of blagging it when I was younger, and you know I would kind of like Santa to be real. It would be nice if there was someone who came round the world with nice presents for everybody and was jolly and happy and had reindeer that he named and could travel at amazing speeds and change size to get into all kinds of buildings. And you know, who's to say it's not possible? Who's to say it's not real? You know, much as I would like it to be, I don't live my life on the basis of it being real. Again, I'm open to being wrong. You know, if next Christmas there's a corpulent red chap knocking on the door saying, "I want my whiskey." I've got some stashed away for emergencies. Actually, I never really drunk any whiskey until I came to New Zealand. And I don't drink that much now, but because I'm Scottish, the hockey teams that I coach have decided that this is the preferred gift of choice. When they were saying to me, "Do you like whiskey?" and they just turn up with a bottle of whiskey. So for one or two whiskey drinking friends, you've got through some of it, but I've got enough whiskey to last Santa coming from now until the next millennium. So it's all been stashed away. And it's really reason, authority, and experience together that build up a picture of what is true. So the people who are speculating, their reason tells them that this isn't just a human being. Nobody is coming up with a rational explanation. Nobody thinks it's dynamo, or that it's just some kind of local guy who's got his act together. They all think there is some kind of supernatural explanation, that this is only attributable to God at some level. Their experience is that many of them have seen something, but they don't quite know what to do with it. So what's going to be the authoritative source? What's going to demonstrate who Jesus is? Peter has come up with an opinion that in the other Gospels, Jesus says this can only have been revealed to you by God. But who's to say that Peter's idea is better than anybody else's idea? Ultimately, what's going to determine the judgment on Jesus? It's going to be two key things. Really. The first thing is in Luke chapter 9. I'll just read through what happens next. Jesus strictly warned them not to tell anyone, and he said, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and teachers of the law, and must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life." So that's going to be the first proof, if you like, that Jesus is going to die and be raised back to life on the third day. Without the resurrection, any claims of Jesus to divinity are essentially null and void. It's only the resurrection that confirms that he is the Messiah, that he is the chosen one, that he has accomplished what God sent him to accomplish on the cross. But that is going to be in the future. It's not something that they are going to experience in the here and now. It's going to become part of Luke's authoritative account of the life and death and resurrection of Jesus that's going to help people today to do an investigation and to make up their mind. And he talks about the cost of following Jesus in verse 23 through 27. Verse 28, about 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendour talking with Jesus. So this kind of nails once and for all the idea it might have been Elijah, because there they are together at the same time, at the same place. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As the men were leaving, Peter said to him, "Master, it's good for us to be here. Let's put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He did not know what he was saying. Understandably, a bit kind of sleepy, a bit befuddled, not quite sure how he knew they were Moses and Elijah, whether they had name badges on that they wore them for the occasion, or whether there was just something about them that occurred to Peter this was who he was in the company of. Fascinating meeting. Loved to have been there to hear the chat. Elijah, who's not been through death, Moses who has been through death. Moses who led the people out of captivity in Egypt through the wilderness, who had that great desire to enter the promised land, but was not able to do so. And because of his sin and the rebellion of the people, he wound up dying, having seen the promised land, but not having entered it. And it was Joshua who took the people into the land. Incredible, in the wider sovereignty of God, that Moses gets his wish to stand in the promised land. Not with the people that he was leading, but with the Son of God and Elijah. Incredible that Moses, whose prayer was to see the face of God, and God said, don't even think about that. You see my face, you're going to die. I'll show you my back. And Moses saw God's back, and his head was luminescent for a week. Like one of these kind of things that you crack lasts a couple of hours, but it was beaming to the extent that he got a bag over his head because it was too bright, and somebody had invented sunglasses, you know, to do the bag trick. That Moses, who'd asked that of God, God answers that. A long time later, different place, different way. But you can tell that Peter's not going to be the best witness here about what's going on. And it's not necessarily going to be definitive. So the other thing that really underlines and speaks with authority about the identity of Jesus is in verse 34. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son whom I have chosen, listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves, did not tell anyone at that time what they could see. So we have God himself speaking on this mountain. This is my son whom I have chosen. Listen to him. You don't get much more conclusive than that. God himself speaking and saying, this with my authority is true. This is who Jesus is. It's not up for debate. He's my son. I've chosen him. Listen to him. God has spoken audibly about Jesus once before in Luke's Gospel. In chapter 3, when Jesus is being baptized. In verse 21 of chapter 3. When all the people were being baptized, Jesus was baptized too. And as he was praying, heaven was opened, and the Holy Spirit descended on him in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." So the first time God speaks audibly about Jesus to Jesus, he's directly speaking to Jesus. Luke chapter 9, he's speaking to anybody who wants to listen about Jesus. You are my son, this is my son. And what Luke's contention is going to be from start to finish is that this person, Jesus, is God himself. It's God's son. It's the chosen one, expected, prophesied in the Old Testament, who has come to rescue people from their sin and selfishness, who has come to defeat the power of sin and death in their lives, who has come to effect a new covenant with the God who made them and knows them and loves them, who is going to fulfill the promise that he has made, that the descendants of Abraham will inhabit the whole earth, that the earth will be filled with the glory of God. At the time of this being written, there were no people in these islands. The only indigenous mammals in New Zealand are 2 small species of bat. But God knew that New Zealand was there, and he knew that the good news would come here, and that was part of his sovereign purpose for what was going to happen. That Jesus was going to die for the people of the future as well as the people of the present. So there would be people from every tribe and every nation gathered together in that great community on that last great day. Pretty darn exciting. So if you look at what the disciples knew at the start of Luke chapter 9, they knew Jesus and they'd been sent out to share his kingdom. But by this point, they know more. They've begun to discover for themselves more about the true identity of Jesus. From Peter, revealed from God, that you're the Messiah, the chosen one, and from God himself, broadcasting on channel God, this is my son, listen to him, this is the chosen one. And what's going to happen is that it is going to profoundly shape the way that they live, both while Jesus is with them and in the future. So if you look at that passage that we skipped over in Luke chapter 9, from verse 21, Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone. And he said, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and teachers of the law. And he must be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised to life." And he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very soul? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his glory, and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God." So I guess the question that I want to ask tonight is, do you know Jesus? And if you know Jesus, are you excited about who he is and want to share that with others? When my eldest son was a little boy, we were walking along a street in Edinburgh. He was about 2, and there were some big black cars parked in the road. And we stopped and looked at them because when you're 2, a big black car is one of the most exciting things you can ever discover. And it turned out that the Queen had been opening a building and was about to come out. And there was royal weird people who'd been waiting for hours to see the Queen, dressed in Union Jacks and stuff, and I spoke to them for a few minutes and they were ecstatic about the idea of a glimpse of the Queen again. Some of them had scrapbooks with every time they'd been somewhere near the Queen in their lives that they kind of collected. And after about 10 minutes, despite the fact that there were shiny black cars that looked like and the Queen was coming out, I was starting to lose the will to live talking to these royalists kind of people. So I said, look, we'll give up, we'll just kind of, no idea how long she'll be, we'll walk along the road. So he was getting a bit tired, I put him on my shoulders, walking along the road, halfway down Chambers Street in Edinburgh, and the black cars come past, and the Queen looks out of the window and waves to Luke in her kind of, "Hello, I'm the Queen." Sort of. You know, I'm not knocking her, I like Her Majesty, but she does that well. She's a lot of time to practice, you know, and it was a special moment between me and the Queen. Because she stopped to pay attention to my small, cute, blonde son. She'd left the royal weird people behind. She'd identified a small child of beauty. She'd taken the time to come away. Now, I told quite a lot of people that month that I'd seen the Queen of the United Kingdom. Probably told more people that week that I'd seen the Queen than that I knew the King. Why was there a greater immediacy in terms of me talking about seeing the Queen than about knowing the King? When did I learn embarrassment or choose to become reserved? If Jesus really is God's Son, if he really is the chosen one, if he really died and rose again, if he's coming back, if he's the one who offers forgiveness and life and hope, that's worth getting excited about. I don't find it easy with the people that I coach hockey to talk about Jesus, because it's not primarily why they're there. But there are opportunities when people ask what I do, what are you doing at the weekend? Well, I'm going to church. Oh, really? People still do that? You know, this week I'm at a conference with Christian students come think about the new year, and we're doing this thing getting people to read the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life for themselves, because a lot of people hadn't. When we've done Gospels, I've given Gospels to teens and to their parents. There was a situation 2 years ago in the under-18 team where one and the other coach said, "Why do you need to leave?" He said, "Oh, there's a thing." He said, "What sort of thing is it?" He said, "Oh, it's a sort of family kind of thing that I need to go to." So the other coach was kind of happy with that, but you know, I wasn't happy with that. So I took him aside and said, "What is this family thing? Is it like a church thing?" He goes, "Oh, it is. I'm getting baptised." I said, "Well, it's okay to tell people that." And then the next week, before he went to be baptised, I was able to pray with him in the centre circle and allow him training that he would represent Jesus well on the pitch. And we need to be praying that for each other and helping each other in the classroom, on the sports field, in the orchestra, with our family, in community, to take the opportunities we have to talk about Jesus. At the end of a rep season, we have a barbecue at our house, and the team and their parents and siblings and stuff come round. And a couple of years ago, one of the dads kind of stopped when he was leaving and said, "Some of us have been talking about you. we've been trying to figure you out because we recognise that you seem to want our sons to become better young men as well as better hockey players." Pretty much it. Said, so I've been Googling you. There's quite a lot of stuff about you online. I said, sure, some of it might be true. So that would be thrilled that people thought there was any connection between the way I did anything and my Christian faith. I'm really quite encouraged. Can't remember if we had some whiskey or not. Anyway, here now. What we want to pray is that people see our good deeds and praise our Father in heaven. Now, I've coached 10 rep teams, and I've only got 3 stories like that. So there's a lot of time standing in the rain, being like Jesus, serving people, where you've no idea what's going on. But being who Jesus has called us to be, sharing the good news of the kingdom of God, being dependent on Him, and helping people to come to a clearer realisation, or at the very least to want to investigate for themselves who Jesus is what we hope is going to characterise this year in TSCF and the groups around the country. That we'll want people to think, not to be afraid to ask hard questions. I firmly believe that faith is not a leap in the dark, it's a step into the light. That God has given us minds, and we shouldn't be afraid of questions. To think through the Christian faith, to read for themselves part of the Word of God, the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life, with the conviction that if they do that, God will speak to them. It's not just about me winning an argument, it's about them meeting God. See, that's what Luke is doing with Theophilus. He's trying to help him know the certainty of the things that he has been taught. It's what the disciples discover on the Mount of the Transfiguration, that they encounter God in a different way for themselves. Because ultimately we want people to come to an experience of God for themselves. That they invite Jesus into their lives and begin to live differently with Him in response to His love and grace. There is more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who believe. We are a Christian group that exists for the people who are not the members, to share that good news with the people around us. We are a mission station on campus. We are Jesus' team sent out, not on our own, but together and with Him to spread that good news. And my hope is that at the end of this week, you guys have become catalysts so that your enthusiasm multiplies as you go back and meet and interact with other people on campus. And that they pick up something of your enthusiasm and want to pray with you and talk with you and think about what you can do together to publish abroad the name of Jesus. I'd like to turn to the person next to you and say something about your experience of coming to faith, and say something about your experience of trying to share your faith, and ask them to give thanks for bringing you to faith and to pray that God will help you to share that faith with greater boldness and confidence and being yourselfness, which is all really that God requires of us. Okay? So that means you share 2 things each and you pray 2 things each. Oh, I was going to jump on that. Yeah, that wasn't the serious one. The serious thing is that if you are a Christian, you know God. You don't know about Him. You actually know God. You know, if people really got their heads around that, There would be National Geographic specials on each of you. Chris Hay, the man who knows God. Chris, tell us about knowing God. It would be mind-blowing. And it is. You know God. Not because of you, because of God. Because of Jesus coming. You know God. And it's the start of a relationship that's going to go on for a very long time. Even after the earth melts like snow.